Tanya.
It's because she's messing around.
You're like,
I can't see you now. I'm
wait.
doing the stream.
Now we're streaming.
No, well, we're about to.
Well, it says meeting is now streaming live.
It is now. There we go. So, good evening, everybody. How are we?
But thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank
Good.
you. Good. Okay, so for those people that will be watching this on Facebook, I'm just going to go through some brief introductions and then we'll get started with everyone's questions that they've submitted. So the first thing to say is that this call aims to kind of give guidance, and in doing that, we are doing that on a best endeavours basis. So this doesn't constitute professional advice. If you wish to speak to any of the panel, and we'll introduce them shortly, about individual circumstances, please do make use of all the bio section and get in contact with everybody, and I'm sure that they will be more than happy to help. So on the call, we have with us, we've got Nicola, and Nicola is from Morecambe Bay Wills and Estates Limited, specialising in wills, powers of attorney, estate planning, inheritance tax advice, executor assistance, funeral plans and secure document storage, running the business with a affordable peace of mind and also a charitable focus. We have Janet Whitworth. Janet is from Whitworth Consulting Ltd and specialises in HR support to directors and managers of SME across the northwest of England. We have Christine Harwood from Account Matters. Christine provides bookkeeping, payroll and accounting support, as well as her team also, to SMEs in the local area. We have Richard Parker from Blend Accountants. Richard is the operations director, and Blend Accountants are based in Morecambe and specialise in helping businesses grow. You have myself, Ruth Wilkinson, business coach and social media, and I do coaching online also, and I'll be facilitating for this evening. And you have Tanya and Annabelle from TP Financial Solutions, who specialise in approachable and jargon-free pension, investment and protection advice for individuals and businesses. And this I definitely think has been typed to try and trip me up. Fee-free first appointment.
Well done.
Well done.
Yeah. And then we have Gail Escolme. Gail is from Gail Escolme, and I haven't pronounced that correctly.
You have indeed.
Brilliant. Legal services. Gail runs a niche legal practice based locally, specialising solely in employment law, and offers advice across all employment law issues, including unfair dismissal, discrimination, termination of employment, including settlement agreements, and of course any issues relating to current COVID-19. So have I introduced everybody well? Is that okay?
Well done.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Brill. Okay. This session is being recorded. If for any reason we have an interruption in our broadcast, we'll continue the session, we'll continue to record, and we will post it later for you. And we will interact with you on Facebook, where we can hope to see your questions and information that's coming up. So I suppose at this point, it's probably best to get into some questions. So we've had quite a few submitted. We've got a couple of questions first of all, and I'm kind of going to open this to the floor. We may have some wanting to answer, or I'll indeed ask you if you wish to. So we've got one from Joanna Cameron, and Joanna says that she doesn't currently meet the requiremits for universal credit, but knows these are changing at the start of April. We don't necessarily want to comment on people's individual circumstances, so it's quite general if it's best. Should I apply now and be told I'm not eligible, or possibly go onto some sort of list, and do I wait until April time? I don't know whether anybody has any thoughts on that.
The universal credit guidelines are changing. I know that the income floor has been removed, so people that may not have been eligible previously may now be eligible, so it's worth applying just to rule that out as an option, but I can't really say any more than that on universal credit.
Okay, thank you. And she's also had an email from HMRC about COVID-19 self-employed support. Does that mean, as far as anyone can tell, that she is already on their list? So I know, yes, these have been kind of almost a basic generalized email, haven't they, that have been going out. So I'm wondering whether or not anybody has any view on that.
So
HMRC's list at the minute, who they're looking for. If you've put in your 18-19 tax return, so the one that was due 31st January, just gone, that is what they are using to try and identify who is eligible, and that is that's the document they're looking at to try and find out who it is. If you've missed the January deadline, they have said they're going to wait until the 23rd of April for any extra submissions for people. But it is the 2018-2019 tax return they'll be using to try and find the eligible people.
Thank you. Okay. And we've got a couple that are about universal credit. I'm just going to say for everyone who's watching, I don't know whether we're comfortable to answer those because we're not necessarily specialists in personal benefit. So I don't know. I'll open that to the panel. Would you like us to do that, or shall we go back to those people individually with some advice, numbers and lines they're best to go to?
I think following on from what Christine said, I think it's, you know, it's obviously all on an individual basis, and there have been some changes over the last couple of weeks, you know, from the announcements from the Chancellor. And I think to sort of echo what Christine said, there's absolutely no harm at the moment in people getting an application in and having that initial assessment done. I think if that's one of the measures that people think is going to support them through this process, then it might be worth getting the ball rolling. Obviously, if anyone's got any particular questions about that on a case-by-case basis, I'm sure that, you know, the people on the panel will be happy to speak to them and just to answer any questions about it. And I think generally, because it's so chaotic at the moment, it's right, put the application in and see how it goes and take it from there on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
It's Ruth. It's also become apparent today that when you are claiming, you need to state that you've been affected by COVID-19, your business has been affected by it, because they're assessing you on the standard basis otherwise.
Right. So it's almost making special mention that the reason for the claim is hardship due to COVID-19. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a number of people that are watching us at the moment, so I think we've got 16 and 17. Okay. So we've also got myself from Angela McBride. Myself and my husband are both self-employed, a partnership. Because we didn't have a great year in 18-19 profit-wise, when I picked my accounts up in February, he told me that he'd put all the profits onto my tax form, didn't file a tax form for my husband. Can he now claim or not? Is there anything that I can do? I don't know whether or not Richard or Christine, you want to, I mean, I know it's scarlet in its detail, but.
Yeah, we probably need a little bit more information about the specifics. I'm not quite sure what they mean. Has it all gone through on one tax return rather than being split between two of them? Is that what they're kind of saying?
That certainly seems to be the inference, yeah.
Yeah, without seeing the specifics of how the tax return's been put together and why it was only put through on one tax return, we can't really comment. Yeah, it's a difficult one without the facts.
Yeah.
Okay.
All I'd say is potentially they're going to be viewed individually. So if all the profits gone through on him, then potentially they'll be looking at his tax returns over the last 3 years and taking an average for him, and then looking at hers and taking an average for her for 3 years. So they'll probably get two separate amounts, even though they've got a partnership.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. Janet, I think we're probably going to come to you first. So could a business owner furlough an apprentice? And we probably just need to explain what this furlough means for anyone who didn't join us in our last call, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Furlough is the term that the government's using for the scheme where employees may have been made redundant, but as an alternative, you can lay them off. They're not to do any work at all for you. You can pay their salary and reclaim up to 80% from HMRC when the portal opens in April. So you could pay them 80% or you could pay them 100% if you chose, but you could only reclaim 80%.
Thank you. Okay, so that question was around an apprentice.
Yeah, an apprentice is an employee, should have a contract of employment as well as the apprenticeship agreement. You can furlough an apprentice. If they don't have an express term in their contract allowing you to lay them off, it should be with their agreement. However, if they are furloughed for more than 4 weeks, it can be an interruption to their training plan and you would probably need to notify the training provider. It might affect the term of the apprenticeship. It might have to be extended to allow them sufficient time to complete all their assignments and end assessment.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. The next question is, do staff continue to accrue holidays whilst in furlough or on furlough or furloughed?
Yeah, I'll start, and Gail might want to comment on this as well. We've no definitive guidance on it, but because we have been told that furlough doesn't change any other existing sort of employment law or the terms and conditions of the employee, we are assuming that people will continue to accrue holiday while they're on furlough. So at some point you might want them to take some holiday on 100% pay as opposed to 80% pay, or when they come back, you need to be aware they could have quite a lot of accrued holiday.
Okay. So operationally that could impact a business ongoing thereafter, couldn't it? Gail, do you want to join?
Yeah, if I can just, I agree with that. If I can just add, the government have said today that if it's not reasonably practical to take holidays in this holiday year, people can roll them over to the next 2 holiday years. They can roll 4 weeks of the 5.6 holidays over if it's not reasonably practicable to take them.
Okay, so there's probably quite a few business owners there thinking about how they would resource and plan a business in the event that people take over a sizable chunk of their leave allowances into next year.
And also employers can say when employees take the holidays, as long as they give twice as much notice as the holidays they want them to take.
Okay, so if an employer wanted an employee to take a week's holiday,
They would need to give them 2 weeks notice.
Okay,
unless they could agree otherwise.
Great, that's very helpful, thank you. And can I furlough somebody who is on a 0 hours contract?
Yes, the updated guidance that was updated last night has stated that 0 hours contract workers are eligible to be furloughed if their employer is laying them off. And the advice is you should either look at the pay that they got in the same month a year ago, or average pay over 52 weeks, or as long as they've been working for them, to give a fair figure to work out then the 80% pay.
Okay, so somebody on a 0 hours contract, they would be looking at something which is an accumulative number of previous work history, and then they base that on that 80% on that.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so next questions. Christine, probably a couple for yourself. We probably have just mentioned a little bit about the 0 hours contracting, so it may well have been covered from that point of view. So one of the questions that's been coming up quite a lot is around where directors sit in all of this scenario. And Richard, and in fact, actually, most of you may well have a view on this, so it's probably for everybody to give their view. But what are company directors entitled to claim if they are unable to work due to their business being closed? And in brackets there, someone's put dividends. So
yeah, so it very much depends on how the directors are paid, because there's different ways directors can be paid. So if they're being paid through the PAYE system and their business has closed because of COVID-19 and they can't work, then they will be able to furlough themselves and claim 80% back through the grant from the government. Dividends don't fall into either of the 2 schemes that have been announced, either the self-employed scheme or the job retention scheme. So they're outside the scope of what's been announced so far. So it's literally PAYE is the only thing they can claim at the moment through those 2 schemes.
Okay. I was going to say thank you, but I'm not sure everyone watching it is going to say thank you for that.
Don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Richard.
No, I think you've covered everything there. I think the employees, there was a massive outcry of the what about me's for the sole traders. So they've addressed that. I see this as the next big outcry of, well, I'm a director, what about me? You know, I put through the most tax efficient salary for myself. Everything else is made up by dividends. This will not cover my outgoings. So I'm hoping the government are going to recognise it and give us some form of guidance by next week.
Yeah, and I think there is an assumption, isn't there, that that the director somehow is trying to blag that system, and therefore actually that they've got a very healthy salary. But actually, some of these are directors of small, 2, 3, 4, 5 employee businesses, and aren't necessarily in that very large bracket of a director of a large multiple site, multiple employee business. So some of them are going to face real financial hardship in this event potentially. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And they're caught between the having to furlough and do no work and not being like the sole traders where they can work and still be paid. They're just falling down the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. And they wouldn't obviously not want to attend to the business, because when this is all over, they don't want to have left a business to go dormant either. So there's a kind of real set of circumstances there. Sorry, Nicola, I think you might be, did I miss?
I think there was a couple of points. You just mentioned there could be directors of a small company with 2 or 3 employees. There are many companies, limited companies, where the only person, the only employee is the sole director. Yeah. And that's, you know, if you're in a franchise agreement, for example, you know, they often insist that you're a limited company, even though it's only you. So, you know, that it's not big companies, it's not even small companies. Sometimes it is just you. And so in effect, you are like a sole trader. You just have to have, you know, the legal entity of a limited company. So I think that's one thing. The second is probably more a question on the detail. I think we might have a question about this, but so somebody was asking, why would a sole trader be able to carry on working and a director not be able to carry on working in their business? So 2 things come out of that. One is, do any of you have any comments about why there is that discrepancy and whether you think it'll be tackled? But just as importantly, what does not do any work actually mean? Can you carry on marketing, social media, as long as you're not generating revenue? So those are a few questions wrapped up in one, but all about the same thing. Panel.
I think the point on what can a director do in terms of work, obviously a director has a legal obligation to meet statutory deadlines, make sure VAT returns are submitted, make sure company accounts are filed. And in essence, that's just a role of a director, whether you're earning an income as an employee through the company as well. So those statutory deadlines are governed by law. They've got to be adhered to. They've got to be done. So that kind of thing, I would assume, would be permitted, although it's not been laid out in any guidance that I've seen yet. It's actually the fee earning element of it that seems to be the key point here, in whether that director is working on the business or just working to keep it ticking over and meeting its legal obligations.
Yeah, and to cover the why the sole trader can still work, I'm going to assume it's because the guidance we've been given is that if the director is to receive anything, it is because they're an employee and then get furloughed, and then they have to follow all the furlough rules, which means you cannot be working.
So let's hope there's something more to come then. Is that the general consensus?
Yeah, I think most people, that's what most people are hoping, because, you know, as a sole trader, you can carry on doing your job. And in fact, I'm assuming you can go and work in a supermarket, for example.
That's really interesting, because that is one of the questions we've been asked. So that if you're not able to do the job as a director of a company that you are in that role for, and effectively, I mean, I can't see, but maybe there's nothing there that is attending or needs attending to, can you go and pick up work somewhere else?
Ruth, I think Gail might want to follow on this as well. As a director, if you're on payroll and have a contract of employment, you would have to look at what's in your contract of employment. And similarly, if you work for a supermarket, what's in that contract, because some contracts of employment have exclusivity clauses. You can't go and work for someone else. Obviously, if it's your own contract and your own company, you could give yourself permission. Yeah. But in general, I would say that people just need to be aware of that there might be exclusivity clauses in employment contracts that preclude you from working for 2 people at the same time.
And it is really interesting you say that, because, and it is still a point, because if you're going to go and try and do some work for somebody who's in a similar business industry that your business is in, there may be some non-compete and other areas of their contract which actually would negate you from being able to do that anyway. Yeah. So, Gail, I don't know whether you have a view on that.
I just agree with all that's been said, really, that you do have to check the contract, make sure what it says in there to see whether there's any restrictions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to come to Tanya and to Annabelle. It's a very broad question, but someone has asked, should I close my investments and move them to cash?
I think it's probably a question that's come up quite a lot over the last 2 weeks. I think naturally the emotions take over in this sort of situation, and I've spoken to a few people, even just a chap on the street the other day who said, I've sold all my shares and I'm holding it in cash, and then I'll come and have an appointment with you once things get better. And I think the main thing to bear in mind if people are considering doing that sort of thing is that if there's a buyer for what you're selling at that discounted price, why are they wanting to buy it? If it was a case that you couldn't sell your investment because the market had literally ground to a halt, then it would be a different story. But the fact is that if someone's prepared to buy, there's a reason for that. And essentially the reason is very likely to be that they're buying at quite a nice discount, and try not to be the bargain. I think the other side of it is that obviously interest rates are in the gutter, and are probably going to be there for quite some time. So the prospect of removing yourself from investment at a time where things are very low, holding it in cash where the interest rates are pretty much zero, if the intention is then subsequently to go back into the market when things improve, you've sold when it's low and buying when it's high. And it's just logically, I know that emotionally it feels better, but logically it doesn't make any sense. And I think it's just trying to stick to that long-term plan of why have I got these investments? What is it for? And try to ride out the storm. And if it's a case of having a chat through with people or whatever it is, I think it's just really, really trying to stick to whatever the plan was when you originally took out the investment.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've got a number of people watching us now. Thank you, Sam. You're saying there's some great information here being explained really well. So thumbs up, everybody. You're doing a really good job. There you go. So Nicola, one for yourself. Can someone else help me with my financial affairs, so banking and benefits and things, if I am self-isolating? So say, for example, they're not very technical. They don't necessarily do the online thing. They don't have an online banking that, for whatever reason, that's just not been an avenue that they've arranged. What's there for them potentially, either now or in the future, if they want to prepare themselves?
So I suppose there's a couple of things. If we're thinking particularly about banking, you can't just give someone your bank card. You're breaking the banking code if you give them the PIN number as well. So I just need to let you know that. So, but many people are obviously doing that. There is a more formal way of giving someone authority, and that's a power of attorney. The problem with powers of attorney is that you normally would take out a lasting power of attorney, and that is something that allows you to do financial work on behalf of the donor. So an attorney does work on behalf of the donor when they have capacity. In other words, they can make their own decisions, and then into the future if they lose capacity. So it has that safeguard of, for example, someone in dementia, starting with dementia, knows what they're doing at the moment, can make a power of attorney, and then eventually may lose capacity. So that's a lasting power of attorney. The problem with those is that, there isn't a problem with them. They should be in place. And these times are the times when you really realise how valuable they are. The challenge with them at the moment is that they take 8 to 12 weeks to put into place. And for that purposes, it may be too late. I would advise start the process anyway. But there is a short-term alternative, and it's something called a general power of attorney. So a general power of attorney is very temporary. It can be made for a limited, specific amount of time. So you could say, set something up between now and the end of the year, for example. You can still give people the same authorities. Some banks will limit it. So for example, you can't take a loan out on somebody's behalf. But there are two big differences. One is they are only valid when you have capacity. So if you lost capacity, they expire automatically. The second difference, and this is the big benefit at the moment, is you do not need to register them with the Office of the Public Guardian. So basically you can make a general power of attorney, you can sign it and have it witnessed, and it's immediately valid. So that's a big difference between the two. So I would look at it as the short term.
Okay, so that's a quick question then. So when we talk about capacity, if someone falls, you know, God forbid, but if someone falls poorly, not long-term degenerative illness, but just that sounded wrong, but poorly, is that considered capacity, or is that something that it would help with?
I think it's, if someone's ill and they're able to, the capacity is not about being able to do stuff, it's about being able to make decisions.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you, God forbid, you were in hospital, you ended up in hospital on a ventilator, you are maybe not able to sign a check or whatever, but you're still able to give authority, or you're able to make decisions for yourself and nod or whatever and just say, yes, I agree that this is something that I would want to do. That's capacity, really, in its simplest sense.
Okay.
There are there is a standard 5 sets of guidelines about measuring capacity, but in its simplest sense, it's not just about doing, it's about having the ability mentally to be able to make decisions.
Okay.
So that's what capacity is. So right now, if you had someone who was self-isolating, they didn't have and didn't want to do online, and they wanted a friend or a family or a neighbour to go and do the banking for them, or talk to the benefits agency for them, for example, they could use a general power of attorney. So just for your information, my company, or I am offering those powers of attorney, those general powers of attorney, free for over 70s at the moment.
Okay.
They take 2 to 3 days to put in place. I have to do a telephone consultation to make sure somebody does have capacity, but they can be in place in 2 to 3 days. So I'm offering them free for people over 70. For under 70s, I'm offering them for a £25 fee. However, all of those proceeds are going to cancer care.
Right.
So in effect, I'm doing them for free. For the over 70s, they're more than welcome to make a donation. But anyone who wants that document put in place at the moment, just contact me and you can have it available in 2 to 3 days. Just bear in mind, it's temporary and it does not protect you into the future. So you should always think about a lasting power of attorney.
That's brilliant, Nicola. That was really generous.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And Nicola, and everybody's details are in this introduction. So if you want to contact Nicola after this, or any of the members of the panel, you're able to do that directly from the introduction as well. Okay. Richard, I only became a sole trader this tax year. Do I qualify for a scheme?
No, what they've basically said is they're looking at the 2018-2019 returns. Anyone who became a sole trader this year, unfortunately, they're basically look at universal credit because they're looking at last year and the years before there to try and get an average. So anyone this year to try and mitigate any gaming of the system as it was, they're basically saying you have to have had a return done already.
Okay, thank you. And Gail, if I can come to you next. Okay, so we've got ones that are all that are around kind of sick leave and then employee contracts. So there's a mix here, but so bear with me while I just kind of go through some of these. So if I'm an employee and I'm on long-term sick, and I announce that I want to return to work, can I take advantage of the furlough scheme?
Well, if you're fit and able to come back to work, then yes, you can. But if you're long-term sick, there must be a reason for that, although it might flush out some little anomalies there. But if you can prove that you're fit and able to work, then you could come off long-term sick and go on to furlough.
Okay, and we're presuming that that's somebody would want that, I suppose, in this instance, because they may be on SSP and now they're going to
Absolutely. Yeah, they would get more money. Yeah.
Yeah, and for statutory sick pay, I keep doing that. I keep using all. Okay, thank you. And then another one, if an employee who has a company sick pay clause in their contract, sorry, I'm an employee who I have a company sick pay clause in my contract, entitled to company sick pay. Would I get that if I self-isolate?
No, probably not, because company sick pay is quite apart from statutory sick pay. So whilst the regulations may say that you can get SSP whilst you self-isolate, company sick pay is really discrete and it's for sickness. So whilst employers could choose to pay it if they wanted to. There's no legal obligation unless the contract specifically says so. And in my legal lifetime, I've never seen a contract that defines a company's sick pay clause in that way.
Yeah, I agree.
I was going to say, John, I could see you nodding. Is there anything you want to add?
Definitely.
No, okay. Okay, thank you. Annabelle and Tanya, another one for yourself. Will my current protection policies pay out if I needed to make a claim for an ongoing illness or worse due to COVID-19 or coronavirus?
Shall I take this one? It really does depend on what cover you have in place. So it's really important to dig out those policy documents and have a really good look through what you've got in place. And if you can't find them, contact the insurance providers. Some insurance companies that we work with have confirmed that on all deaths as a result of COVID-19, the life insurance element will pay out. Where it becomes a bit of a grey area is things like critical illness cover and income protection.
Right. Because
those types of protection have named conditions that they will pay out for. As COVID-19 is a new disease, it's unlikely that that is named in any critical illness cover that we've come across anyway. Where it does come into play is if unfortunately you are diagnosed with COVID-19 and that leads to further complications, say for example, it puts you into kidney failure or heart failure, those conditions then become part of your critical illness cover, right, at which point you can look at claiming on those types of insurance. As with anything that we've talked about in the last video, it's about being able to understand the policies that you've got in place. And we're happy to support people at this time reading through. You know, insurance documents aren't the most interesting documents and they're not the most easy to understand. So if it's just a phone call, a video chat to have a look through what you've got and explaining, you know, what it entails. One of the things we've come across over the past couple of weeks is that more modern insurance policies do include some really, really good free additional benefits. So to give you an example, our life insurance is with Aviva, and they include things like free counselling, free health and wellbeing checks. So what people don't often realise is they're paying for life insurance, paying for critical illness. They think they can only use that if they're critically ill or if somebody's unfortunately died. Actually, a lot of these policies have additional benefits that you can really make use of in this time. I think what's becoming more and more prevalent as people are self-isolating, people are coming out of society, the mental health will naturally be affected. So even if you're not thinking you want to claim on your insurance, it's still worth having a look at your policy documents because there might be additional extras in there that will really, really benefit you. And again, if you want a chart, you're not sure what you've got, we're more than happy to help.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you. There's been quite a few people now going to check documents to work out exactly what.
Because the best way to spend a Friday night
these days,
reading your insurance documents. What I'm doing after this.
Well, I want to know. I wouldn't have thought about those additional benefits. I don't only think it kicks in that more extreme event. So it's really helpful that people might be able to get that. And it's a bit like some of the banking covers and stuff for legal advice and probably actually when thinking about it, it may extend to quite a few policies that people hold.
I think that's the thing. I think it's in this circumstance where, you know, naturally we're responding with what's happening right now. And actually you forget that you're paying into these things. And a lot of them have got things like virtual GPs. So obviously at the moment, you literally cannot see a GP. So even if it was something totally unrelated to COVID-19 and you needed a GP for your child or for yourself, and you can't go into a doctor's surgery, a lot of these policies you can actually FaceTime with a doctor. And it's just knowing that you've got these things built into the policies. and knowing how and when you can claim on them, because obviously you're paying into them, and just make sure that if anybody's in a situation where they know they've got a policy but they've no idea what it actually covers them for, you know, have a look and make sure that if there's anything in there, you know, whether it's counselling or anything, a lot of it is completely free. And, you know, you've got someone on the end of the phone to help you through the, you know, any mental health problems or anything that crops up that's causing trouble over the next few weeks. You know, you should be able to speak to somebody, you know, for no cost.
Thank you. And for all those people that are watching this on Facebook, if we could ask you to share this while it's in broadcast, it may well make that, you know, that kind of information may help people that, regardless of business circumstances, regardless of anything else, it could really be beneficial. So if you could help to share this while it's in broadcast, that'd be really helpful. I'll answer a quick.
Sorry, Ruth. It was just a quick one to say. Quite a lot of what we're talking about, although we're saying this is aimed at business users or business owners, you know, that piece of information that Annabelle and Tanya have just shared, the thing around powers of attorney, for example, some of the other things around the employee rights, they're not just about business owners. So this, you know, share this among your friends and family, because this isn't just about business, help for business. And
I think it's right, and it's a point really, it kind of ties in to this next question. So actually, if we were radio presenters, we'd have called that a bit of a segue then. We've got, there's a link here, that one of the questions here, which is around, there's so much stuff on social media, how do I know which information I can trust? And I think, Nicola, that goes back to your point about what is helpful and what's not. And I was talking to someone very recently, and I said, you know, you need to kind of look at this. I mean, if it's from a business point of view, please read the article link before you just share it on. The amount of times I've watched businesses, you know, they've read the top 2 lines and then they've kicked it in thinking it's helpful, and you read it and think, oh, good God, no, never. So it's really important that you fact check what it is that you're sharing. I can't stress that enough. But then the other part is, and it's probably more personal piece, it's all in my opinion, is if you were in a conversation that you didn't like the tone of, with people that you weren't comfortable with their language and their view and their particular aspects of their conversation, you would leave it. You would walk away, you would put the phone down, you would not bother. And actually the same ought to really be applied to social media if you can, which is that if it feels overwhelming or it feels overwhelmingly negative, then there is an aspect there which you also have the control and capacity to remove yourself from that situation. And that I don't want to sound preachy when I say that, but often with lots of time on our hands and more exposure online and people not being at work, there is this kind of potential urge to flick through things, and a lot of that isn't right. So in terms of any of the COVID-19 stuff, whenever I do anything for clients, it's either off the World Health website, it's directly from the NHS, or it's from a government website. That's it. I just don't go near anything else. And if I can't find the answer on there, I don't share it. The other part of that probably would be in terms of, you can post about COVID-19 if you want to as a business, if you are providing knowledge. I've seen lots of business owners which understandably are venting around their personal circumstances and so on, but they're doing that on pages where people can link the fact that they are the business owner of another business page. Personally, I would try to steer away from that. If you have business groups that are secret or private that you can go and post and get that information or vent or do that in, you've got a business coach, you've got somebody else you can speak to. My preference or my advice would be to do it there, because that information sits long, you know, has a long memory. Social media has a very long memory. Ask any politician who happened to say something 15 years ago, it's got a very long memory. So I would just be very cautious about, is what I'm about to post helpful to others? If it's not, it doesn't go public. If is what I'm about to post helpful for me to vent, fine, but private. And that would be probably me on my soapbox for 5 minutes. So
I think, like, you know, the conversation we had with you this week, just sort of saying, you know, we want to respond, but you've got to be so careful about the tone of what you're saying, because the information's changing day by day. And I think people just need to be like, the one thing that we've been really careful with in collaboration with Ruth this week, is just being careful about what we're posting and when. So not just having something set up and we'll let it go out regardless. It's if there's been some really bad news or whatever it is actually pulling back on what we're doing and slightly rephrasing it, just so that as business owners, we're not, putting something out there that is inappropriate, because obviously everyone is reacting to this. Obviously there's worry, but it's all just emotion, isn't it? Whether it's negative, positive, whatever it might be, it's being really careful as a business presence how that tone comes across. So that was, from our point of view, Ruth, that was such a useful conversation to have with you, because you kind of almost forget that there's all these other people looking at what you're doing, which seems ridiculous, but you do. And I think it's just being so careful about what is going out.
I think as well, sorry, that opinions are quite divisive. So what you think is naturally going to ostracize your business from, so say it's an opinion, 50% of people agree with you, 50% of people don't agree with you, you're automatically ostracizing half of your audience.
Yeah.
Which from a business perspective in a tough climate is not a sensible thing to do.
It's not, and it's even simple things that are unintended. So I don't know how many of you have got an email this week promoting a holiday or airport taxis, or airport parking, sometimes people have left their adverts to run and they haven't paused them, and they just feel so inappropriate now, and they're not, and they haven't done it intentionally. They've probably just not swiped the pause button on the advert, but they are doing themselves brand damage whilst that's happening. So yeah, absolutely, reading the mood, it would be really, really important.
And one thing I would just add to that is, my Facebook page gets flooded with adverts for wills, as you can imagine. And I've seen so many people say, really, at this time, there'll be a big charity that's doing, free wills. And lots of people saying this is so insensitive at this time. And yet there's another school of thought that says, actually, this is really important,
really needed
at this time.
Yeah.
And so you just don't know what to do. I don't know whether it's the right thing to be promoting a will, for example, or just sort of holding back and, letting people come. But you see that real difference of opinion when you read those comments. So
you do, yeah.
That's the some people will be turned off and some people will go, right, okay, that's something I need to do.
Absolutely. And some people think, oh, I'm so glad I've seen it, because that was the kick up the backside that I needed. And some people have a very visceral response and don't like it. But I think I was doing something for someone today, and I put very much in there, we appreciate this may not be the right time, but we really think you need to have a look at this. We'll leave it here. It's up to you whether or not you want to respond or react, and kind of almost mitigated during the posting so that, people can take it as and when. I've got another question from someone who was asked, I think I may have a pension policy where the beneficiary, if I die, is listed as my ex-wife. If I cannot get through to the company to change it, will my will, leaving everything to my daughters, supersede this? That's probably a question for a couple of parts of the panel.
Do you want to go first, Annabelle? Or not?
I think generally the pensions, operate within their own rules. So they tend to be set up on a trust type basis, in which case, the wishes are listed on there. They are sort of set up as discretionary by the pension fund. So obviously, as the either current spouse or child, if you're then contacting the pension company saying, this is my dad's will or whatever it is, and this is where he's requested everything to be left, they would have the discretion to be able to override the information that they held on their system, but it is discretionary. So obviously it's definitely worthwhile, even if you send a letter or an email, if you can't speak to them, if they've got that on record, regardless of if they're able to actually process it fully at this point in time, it's worth just getting that information over. But like I say, from the pension company's point of view, it is still discretion. So Nicola, you can take over on the will side.
So I mean, absolutely, that's the reason why pensions are excluded from inheritance tax, because they are paid out at the discretion of the pension company according to your wishes. They don't have to follow the wishes that you have on record. If there's other evidence that says that that's not the right thing to do. So if in your will you say, I want to leave everything to my new wife, but your expression of wish form for your pension still says your old wife, they are entitled, that's the pension company is entitled to disregard your original expression of wishes if they think it's the right thing to do, but it is at their discretion. The one thing I would say is that if you think that you can't get through to them at the moment, send them a letter, just say, I want to revise my expression of wishes, post it, make sure it's sent recorded delivery or signed for, and that's your evidence. Yeah. If you think you're in that situation, do that. Make sure your will's up to date though, first of all.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's really good advice. Thank you. So Richard, I'm going to come to you next if I can do. So will they extend the scheme for longer than 3 months? I think they may be talking here about furlough of staff, I'm not sure actually, but will they extend the scheme for longer than 3 months?
So as far as I'm aware, with both the furlough and then the sole trade support scheme that they've just brought out, it's running from the beginning of March through to the end of May. They've basically said that if they need to extend it, they will do. They haven't put any definites in place. Obviously, they don't know when we're going to come out of lockdown, as it were. So it's all up in the air at this moment in time, but they've said they can keep going if they need to keep going. Okay.
And Christine, have you got anything to add to that, or?
No, completely agree with what Richard just said there.
Okay. So actually, Christine, if I could come to you now, what short-term funding options are available to me whilst we wait for the grants to be paid?
Okay, so with this one, there's obviously quite a lot of information being released over the last week and a half about what's available, and it's all down to individual businesses' circumstances. So for your sole traders that haven't got premises, etc., might not be VAT registered, they will be looking at going to universal credit, using any savings they might have put away for their July tax payment. So if people have been saving money, that payment's now been deferred to January 2021. So they could use that in the short term and then top it back up when the grant funding comes through. If they are VAT registered, the VAT payments have been deferred. So they could look at using that money in the short term and then top it back up when the grant comes through. And if they've exhausted all other options, then they will be looking at either, if they've got their own savings, overdraft facilities, just anything short term, but borrowings would need to be a last resort really. But yeah, universal credit for sole traders with very few other options. Richard, have you got anything to add there?
Not really. All I'll say is the council, or our council at least, have said that they'll fund the first 2,500 of the 10,000 grants. So anyone that's got claiming the small business rates relief at this minute that's going to be entitled to the £10,000. That's looking towards the end of April receiving it. But the council has come out and said, if you are in need of funds, we will give you 2.5 of the 10 early. And then when the 10 is released, we will just give you the remainder then.
Now that absolutely is already happening. So I've got some clients that have already received the advance of the 2,500. So it is already going in. So there is an element of, it's about 72 hours between you confirming your bank details to it being paid. So it's quite a quick turnaround in fairness to them. They've done a sterling job in Lancaster City Council to get that done. So
that's an online form that you find on the council website at this moment in time.
And we've got that on the site as well. We've put those links in.
That form also, you can register your bank details as part of the same startup of the form. You either select to claim the grant, the 2,500 up front, or register your bank details if you don't want to do that yet, so that when the full amount's available, they've got your details to be able to pay that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So a couple of questions for Gail and for Janet, if I can do. We did mention this in the last one, but it does get asked quite a bit, so I think it is worth asking the questions again. As an employer, I've made an offer to a potential employee that's been accepted, but I'm now concerned I don't have the work for them. Am I able to withdraw, rescind, whatever you would want to phrase in terms of that agreement?
You want me to start, Ruth, and then I think Gail will have some comment as well. I think the date is key, because as we know, to be able to furlough somebody, they've got to be on the payroll on the 29th of Feb. So it depends what date they were due to start employment. But But if you've done a written or verbal offer confirming a start date, that technically is a contract, and you could be in breach of contract if you rescind it. So one of the best things to do might be able to agree by mutual agreement to defer the start date. If you have the start date was after the 1st of March, you may be able to take them on and furlough them straight away. Again, it depends what's in the contract. So I'll hand over and let Gail say, I'm sure she wants to add to that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say, I think if there's been a proper recruitment process in place and there's documentation to show that this was going to happen, then that might get you over that line. I think what this was trying to do was to stop people just adding people onto the payroll, or saying in the middle of March, you know, oh, my auntie started working for me, or, you know, my husband is actually in with me. I think it was really there to stop that. So I think going forward, if there's a genuine recruitment, whilst it doesn't say that in the guidance, I do suspect that they may be more lenient if you can show that, but I can't guarantee it.
Okay, because that's really interesting, actually, you make that point, because I hadn't considered that. So somebody has been in negotiation with someone for 8 weeks, they've had to serve a long notice, they've been emails backwards and forwards. That would clearly identify, wouldn't it, a lot earlier on,
Yeah,
or some time prior to all of this happening, that the intention was always there to recruit that person then.
absolutely. And if they, you know, the NI number would show really that they worked for somebody perhaps on the Friday, and then on the Monday they started working for somebody else. There's a continuity there which would help as well. As I say, I can't guarantee it, but I do think that would assist in justifying why you think that somebody should be entitled at that point.
Okay, great. A couple of other things around the grant funding. So when is the grant funding due to be paid back? So the grant funding is a grant, isn't it, and not to be paid back. This is if someone has currently has relief, has rate relief. Is that right? Do you want to just confirm that, if you wouldn't mind?
Yes, that is a grant and wouldn't be repayable.
But that person has to have registered for small rate relief, don't they, at some point?
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, they do have to be registered with the council to be eligible.
Okay. And then does grant funding affect universal credit? So I'm not sure whether those two things would happen at the same time, would they? Because if they're in a, would that happen? Would that be in a situation?
I think they're completely distinct things. Yeah. So the rates relief relates to premises, helping your business survive, paying your business overheads whilst the business isn't operating, whereas the universal credit's a personal income top up for you as an individual.
Okay, thank you. And another question we've got is, what's the difference between paying rent for a room, which is inclusive, so therefore the rates are included, when no rates are being paid through rate relief anyway? It doesn't seem like a level playing field, or level pegging, as this person's put. Is there anything else I can claim if I'm not responsible for the rates?
Ultimately, I think somebody will be responsible for the rates, so the landlord of the building you're in, so they will be getting the relief. So it's unfortunate, but it looks unlikely that they'll get any relief whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Gail, a couple of ones for yourself, please, if I may do then. And again, Janet, or the panel in general, but I'm gonna kind of ask Gail. If all staff are laid off, what if as an employee I'm already on sick leave? Am I entitled to be paid?
Well, yes, you are entitled to be paid, but probably sick pay because you're on sick leave. If you recovered and people have been furloughed, then you could move to furlough leave. But if you're still sick, then really you will stay on sick leave because you're not able to work, you're not ready to work.
So furlough really is about, and Janet, I'm going to come to you next, furlough really is about someone who is, for all other intention, ready to do the work, but the work isn't there, and therefore, Janet, is that yeah.
The only thing I would add is the guidance that we've got now where people are shielding, you know, people who may be in particularly vulnerable groups, perhaps they've had a kidney transplant or they're immunosuppressed and they've been advised to shield for 12 weeks. We have been told after the initial 2 weeks self-isolation, when the employer pays SSP and can reclaim it, they can then furlough them after those 2 weeks because they're not actually ill, they are shielding.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the difference.
Gail's quite right. If they're sick, if
Yeah.
they're actually sick, they get SSP. But if they're just having to self-isolate and shield because they're in a vulnerable group, it's SSP for the first 2 weeks, which the employer can reclaim, and then they can be furloughed. You do need to be careful if you're not furloughing all your staff, though, that you follow a fair process for selecting who's furloughed. Otherwise, there are potential discrimination claim issues.
Yeah, so somewhat, because ultimately, certainly if they're not topping up the 20%, there's a change to earning as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Right. Never even considered.
I think the other thing that people just need to bear in mind, you know, going back to what we were talking about the protection earlier, if people have got income protection policies in place and they are ill for a prolonged period of time with this illness, so say it's not just your mild and moderate version of COVID-19, but a more severe version where you are unwell and unable to work for a prolonged period of time, is again, check out those policies, because a lot of the businesses, due to the nature of the illness that, you know, it produces, particularly like we said earlier, if it involves further complications, is that you will be eligible to claim on income protection policies as well. So that could potentially be another source of income support for people during this period if they do become more severely unwell.
Okay, thank you. Now we're coming right to the end now. We've actually been on for an hour already nearly. It's gone quite quick. So I'm just going to ask one more question from a member, a viewer. So if I have it's like my question time. If I have a property currently empty and paying 50% rate reduction, can I claim the grant? So I'm going to presume that is a commercial property. So if I have a property currently empty and I'm paying 50% rate reduction, can I claim the grant? Which is rate relief, isn't it?
Good question.
So
Don't know the answer.
Is that one we'll get back to them on?
Yes.
Okay. Marvelous. Okay.
And
I think the other thing to bear in mind on that one is if they've got a mortgage on that property, is potentially they could be eligible for the mortgage holiday. So that could be something to consider.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then one last one. What support is there for direct limited company judge of right, Geraldine, on your earlier on in this actual broadcast, we've covered that. So when you go to play it back, you'll be able to see that. So we've come to the end really already. I don't think we've got through all of those questions. So for people that are watching that we didn't do, we're sorry, we will do another one as more information comes out. But as we did last time, just to give the panel their opportunity to be able to get across any key messages that I maybe haven't asked you a question, which has enabled you to do that. I just wonder if I want to give you the opportunity, just if we kind of go around everybody, if there are some key things you do want to put across, and words of advice. So this is, like I say, when I start to point at the screen and just pick on someone, which feels very unfair. So I'm going to give you a second to put your hand up if yours has already sprung to mind. There we go, Janet, brilliant. She saved the day.
I just want to say it's very general really, but in terms of employees, please talk to somebody before you act, because it's a lot easier to strategize, to give people options and how you work those options through than it is to try and recover the position if they've acted, and then we may have a breach of contract or a claim. And I'm sure Gail knows exactly where I'm coming from with that one. So yeah, please don't do a knee-jerk reaction. If you think you need to lay staff off, you think you might need permanent redundancies, talk to somebody first, hopefully me or Gail.
Okay, thank you very much. Gail, can I come to you next in terms of anything that you would like to finish with?
It is, we all know that this is really difficult at the moment for employers and employees. And nobody, I think everyone should remember, nobody's trying to get at each other. This is not personal. And if people can just see that and not take it personally, it is going to help the whole thing jog along.
Yeah, so very wise words. Nicola, but anything else from yourself?
I think about protection. You know, for me, you know, I'm thinking about income protection, having a pile of savings, those sorts of things. I mean, it's very easy to say told you so and in hindsight and all of those sorts of things. But, you know, this should be a bit of a not a wake-up call, which is too strong, but, you know, a bit of a thought-provoking situation for us all. And we need to think about just making sure we have protection in place, whether that is, from my side, obviously, wills, powers of attorney, make sure that those things are in place, but also think about, you know, protecting your family and your future by putting other forms of protection, insurance, etc., in place. You know, when we're back up and running, those things will be really important. You never want a situation like this again.
No, absolutely. And wise words. I think that's particularly when I've kind of worked with Tanya and with Annabelle before, you know, the breadth of the stuff that can be done, you know, so is that will making and power of attorney, make sure all that part's done. But it's also that peace of mind during actually, what if this happens? What if that happens? Have I catered for the right people, and have I done it properly? And is it up to date? You know, for supplies with small amounts of money, you can get an awful lot of reassurance. And that's probably what, you're right in terms of I told you so, but I still think there's steps people can begin to make and get advice on that would help put the mind at rest.
Of course, start now, you know, start. Yeah. What would have been like if I'd have had those things in place right now? Start thinking about putting them in place.
Absolutely, absolutely. So on that point, it seems only right. Tanya, Annabelle, would you like to give us your kind of parting words?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us as we're kind of moving through this situation is to not forget what you've already got in place. So, you know, if you've got family members or you yourselves are becoming seriously unwell with this, you know, have a look at the policies that you've got. Even if, you know, yourself, your children, whoever it might be, are experiencing mental health problems or anything like that as a result of these really, really difficult situations, or business people who have protection in place for their employees or themselves, remember that you have these policies, that you are paying into them. And an awful lot of them, like Tanya said earlier, have associated benefits that would be built into it, where you could get some additional support and guidance over the next few weeks, even if you aren't unwell physically from it. And also, you know, if the worst does happen for anybody, is, you know, remember that those policies are there, and the whole point of them is to help in an absolutely terrible situation. And just make sure that, you know what you're doing with them, you know what you can claim for, and that the premiums that you've paid in all this time are actually, you know, you're getting something out of it at a time where, you know, we're all in need of a bit of support.
Thank you very much.
Could I just add one more thing?
Of course.
It's not really in relation to protection, it's more about what the government's been offering people. I think there's been a lot of comment about the speed of that, that people have fallen through the cracks. I think it's been reassuring from a professional point of view that they are eventually covering everybody. So I think the people that are missing at the moment, it tends to be these company directors. I think the good news and the reassurance is that they're doing it in a very logical way. And although it's not coming through as quickly as people might like, the undertaking that the government is going through at the moment is huge. And it's just to have a bit of patience around that, which is difficult in such hard times. But I think it's good to reflect and think, wow, what a job they're undertaking for eventually what will be everybody's benefit. So I think patience is key, and I'm pretty sure they're going to get around to everybody.
Thank you. Richard, from yourself?
Yeah, just to cover a couple of little bits for the sole trader scheme that was announced yesterday. So although it's running March, April, May, covering the 80% of trading profits, it is going to be a lump sum according to the Chancellor in his announcement the other day, and it's looking like the beginning of June that you will get a lump sum. So if you're needing it now, you need to be looking potentially more like the Universal Credit or some of the other funding that they've got going on. And if you are needing it for like April, May, they will be funding it in June. They've also said, please don't call us, we'll contact you. It's one of them fun ones. So they're going to be looking at your tax returns to see if you're eligible and contacting you. It'll all be done through a gov.uk website. The other thing they are warning about is scams. So if people are get hold of your details, either via phone or via text or via email, HMRC have just said, if you're eligible, we'll let you know, and you'll go to a .gov website and enter your details. Do not give your details out to someone else, because if they beat you to the punch, they're getting your money.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And Christine?
Yeah, just the guidance is changing daily. So keep an eye on gov.uk website. There's a whole list of things on there for support for employers, employees, etc. All the different policy documents. Quite a few documents changed yesterday from the original ones that were published. So just keep an eye on it, and more detailed guidance is coming out all the time, particularly about the self-employment scheme. It's very, very basic information that's available at the moment. And as they start to pad out how the scheme's going to work, they'll update the gov.uk site. So there'll be a little bit more information there on the finer details of how it's going to work, who it's going to impact, etc., etc. And also just on the financing side of things, look at that list of things on the gov.uk website, iron out what you're entitled to and what you're not entitled to before you start looking at any other options, whether you need to go down the borrowing route in the short term till the grants come through, whether you need to take a mortgage holiday. See what you've got available to you now before you start looking at other options.
Okay.
Can I just add to that? Don't ask the experts on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people giving their opinion, especially after last night's announcement. You know, wait, and we've said it before, look at the official
look at the official. Nicola, I can't, there's no way I can really give my advice without probably being a bit disrespectful to a couple of people, but you know, there's a reason some people are accountants, solicitors, HR experts, you know, even down to being a car mechanic. There's a reason why they are in that field, and that's because they know that field really, really well. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It's the trusted source information, isn't it? It's going to that trusted source, whether that's somebody locally, certainly somebody on this panel, or whether that is the government accredited sites. Absolutely right. And just going back, my piece of advice I think would be, Richard just mentioned it about scams. It's a 40% increase currently in scams, both on web and particularly on email, and actually some stuff in person where people are approaching people at the door. Particularly on emails, there's a really easy way, or easy-ish way. If you're on a desktop and you double click that email address that gets sent to you, people can mask their address to anything. So it could say gov.uk, but if you double click it, behind that, it will then expand what that email address really is. And if it doesn't end with .gov.uk, or it doesn't end with Halifax, doesn't end with NHS, whatever, yeah, it's not going to be a genuine email. Equally, if you're on a phone or a smartphone and you're on your mail, if you click and hold it, it will expand. Please don't click any links. HMRC will forgive you if you delete their email by accident, because you know they're going to send you another, guaranteed. They're definitely, however, not going to give you your money back if you've managed to give your savings to somebody you shouldn't have done. So definitely double click on them. So that's everything from us. I think probably one thing is each of you have mentioned around advice. So just to be really clear for anybody who is watching us, you've all in the past stated around that you are available to a greater or lesser extent to help provide some reassurance, and you would do that, you know, initially on a free of charge basis, on the basis that, of course, this doesn't end up being a very detailed and complex or laborious scenario. But I just want to make sure that I've given you that opportunity to kind of nod your head at this point and say, yes, please contact us if that is the case. Universal nodding. Brilliant. Okay. And then we will do another one of these calls. So please continue to submit your questions, and we will work out between us when that call might best take place. But it leaves me just to thank all of my panel of experts for giving up your Friday night. I know you can't go out right now, but you could be having a glass of wine at least.
Next Friday we should have a glass of wine with it.
Well, yeah, maybe. But I you know, really do very much appreciate. I'm very grateful for you giving up your time, your expertise. You know, it's very, very generous of you, and you know, on behalf of anyone who's watched this and who continues to watch it in the future, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you for organising it, Ruth, and thanks for keeping all the social media on track.
Okay, well, all of your details are in the links, so anyone who's watching this either live or on replay can contact any of the experts. All of their details are there, and we will look forward to seeing you again soon. So I hope everyone stays happy and stays healthy, and we'll see you all soon.
Nice.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Nice
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.